week of our series called Small Changes, Big Difference. And what we've been talking about throughout the course of this series is this, that what you cannot focus on this year are these big changes, but what you really need to do is you really need to focus on just these small changes that happen over a long period of time. What's going to happen is that you're going to end up with big changes throughout the course of your life then. We've been talking about changes up until this point, but today what I want to do is I want to talk about the time. I want to talk a little bit more about the long haul. So first question I want to ask you is this question right here. Why do we quit? Why do we quit? So in other words, as we're talking about New Year's resolutions, one of the things that I want to talk to you about is this. Why do we set resolutions to begin with? And in fact, why do we set the same resolution over and over and over and over again every single year? I think it kind of goes back to that one idea right there that we have this tendency to just kind of fall down, lay over, and just kind of quit on whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish in our lives. Now I will freely admit that you and I, that there are things in our life that we do need to quit. You know, as we're talking about not quitting, that there's some things in life that we absolutely do need to quit in our lives. For example, when I was in college, I was really into mountain biking. Me and a guy were mountain biking, and we were looking down this huge slope. And if it were just a huge slope, then that would be fine. We could just bomb down the slope. But this slope was filled with roots and rocks and roots and rocks. There were roots and rocks everywhere. And the guy was telling me, you know what? Maybe we should just walk our bikes down this slope. And I was like, you mean before or after we take off our skirts? No, we're just going to go right. I told him this. I'm going to go down this slope if it kills me. Well, long story short, he ended up being fine, and I ended up in the ER with 7 stitches on my head. So literally, I wish I could go back and tell myself, you know what, you just need to quit that, or you're going to end up with a $3,000 bill. So, here's a question that I have for you. If you could go back in time and tell anyone in your life not to quit, who would that be and why? If you could go back in your life and tell anyone not to quit, who would it be and why? I have a pastor friend of mine from Texas. He's always had some demons in his life, but one day he got in a really big fight with his wife, and then the first thing that he did was he went into his basement, he locked the door, and then he took his own life. And I wish I could go back to my friend, and I wish I could say, man, don't quit. It's just not worth it. Maybe for some of you, there's somebody in your life where you'd like to say, please don't quit on your marriage. Please don't quit on your education. Please don't quit on your job. You have a lot of responsibility in life. Don't quit on your job right now. Maybe there's somebody in your life that you'd love to be able to go to and say, you know what? Please don't quit on the Lord. Please don't quit following him, because you have no idea what's at stake and what's going to happen if you end up not following Jesus anymore, whether it be in your own life or whether it be in the lives of your family. You have no idea. For me, who I'd like to go back to? Believe it or not, I'd like to go back to somebody in the Bible named Saul. Saul was actually the first king of Israel. I'd love to be able to go back thousands of years before, when Saul was 29 years old, and I'd love to be able to say 3 things to Saul. Number 1, I'd love to be able to say, you know what, Saul, you're 29 years old, and in 1 year, God is going to choose you to be the next king of Israel. And I think Saul would come up to me and say, no way. And I would say, way. And it's going to be awesome. The second thing that I would say to Saul is this, that what's going to happen? God is going to change your heart, and then God is going to use you to prophesy to his own glory. And I think Saul would say, no way. And what would I say, everybody? I would say, way. And it's going to be awesome. And then the third thing that I would say to Saul is this, that you're going to end up quitting on God. And you're going to end up living a sad life. You're going to end up dying a sad death. Not only is that going to be the case with you, but that's going to be the case with your son Jonathan. And your son Jonathan will never end up being the next king of Israel. All because you ended up quitting on God. Please don't quit on God. You know what it almost kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of that amazing 2004 Academy Award-winning movie called Dodgeball. Have you ever seen the movie Dodgeball? Like, just a life-changing movie from Ben Stiller and Vince Vaughn. Like, if you don't remember the movie, you can go ahead and watch this clip right here.
Can I get a bottle of water? Aren't you Peter LaFleur?
Lance Armstrong?
Yeah, that's me. No, but I'm a big fan of yours.
Really?
Yeah, I've been watching the dodgeball tournament on the Ocho. ESPN 8. I just can't get enough of it. But good luck in the tournament. I'm really pulling for you against those jerks from Globo Gym. I think you better hurry up or you're going to be late.
Actually, I decided to quit. Lance.
Quit? You know, once I was thinking about quitting when I was diagnosed with brain, lung, and testicular cancer all at the same time. But with the love and support of my friends and family, I got back on the bike, and I won the Tour de France 5 times in a row. But I'm sure you have a good reason to quit. So what are you dying from that's keeping you from the finals?
Right now feels a little bit like shame.
Well, I guess if a person never quit when the going got tough, they wouldn't have anything to regret for the rest of their life. But good luck to you, Peter. I'm sure this decision won't haunt you forever.
We have to take that with a grain of salt because it is Lance Armstrong, by the way. But what does Lance Armstrong say? He says this: I guess if a person never quits when the going got tough, with their family, with their finances, with their health, with their job, with their faith, I guess if a person never quits when the going got tough, they wouldn't have anything to regret for the rest of their life. I'm sure this decision won't haunt you for the rest of your life. So I want to go back to that question for a second. Like, why do we quit? Well, what I want to do is I want to share with you a very profound principle today. And it's on one hand, it's extremely profound, but on the other hand, it's extremely simple. And it's so simple that I could even draw that diagram on a napkin. And that's what I'm going to do right here. So what you're going to find is that this is a principle that my mentor shared with me. And it's just a life-changing principle that I love so much. And it's called the ABC zones. So that's what we're going to talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. The A zone, if you want to think about it, is this. Oh, before we get there, here's how I want to kind of prompt that. Here's what you're going to find with the ABC zone. With everything in life, what you're going to find is that in every endeavor, in every project, in any organization, in any family, in any relationship, in any church, in any sporting team, what you're going to find is that there are three different phases that we go through. There are three different zones that we travel through in life, and that's called the ABC zone. In the A zone, what I want to say is this: the A zone is all about the beginning. The A zone is all about those loving feelings. The A zone is about the excitement. There's nothing about blue sky. It's about promise, and it's about brand new horizons at that point. The A zone is the first day that you get that brand new car, and you smell that brand new car smell instead of smelling the oil that's leaking out of the bottom of your car. The A zone is the first day on the job when the job doesn't feel like you're working for the Antichrist, or in the case of the people at this church, an evil Korean dictator. Like you love all the people that you're working with. I mean, the job that you're doing is so extremely significant and it's important. The A zone is literally when you go on your honeymoon. And you and your spouse, this may have been the first time you ever traveled in your entire life. And here you are sitting on the beaches of Jamaica getting fed peeled shrimp by the other person. Like the A zone is the first day in your house when you look at absolutely nothing that needs to be fixed. Yeah, come on. Like the A zone is that brand new Harley Davidson. It's the first day of that relationship. It's the first day of college. It's the first day you're at school. The great thing about the A zone is that it's all about excitement. It's new and it's novel. There's no baggage, and there's nothing that breaks down. Right? This is the pregame at the Super Bowl where everybody's still trash talking with each other because, like, there ain't nothing but blue sky and possibilities that are in front of you. Here's the problem with the A zone. That the A zone doesn't last forever. Okay? The problem with that, next slide, the problem with the A zone is that ultimately you end up going from the A zone into the B zone. And if the A zone is filled with promise, then the B zone is filled with problems. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, baby, I've never experienced the B zone with you. It's been nothing but A zone. Been nothing but good times with you. I don't know what he's talking about with all these problems. If the A zone is filled with promise, then the B zone is filled with problems. There's a company that has made $1 billion business out of this, and here's their tagline right here. I want you to tell me, you can do it, we can help. Can anybody tell me what company that is? It's Home Depot, pretty close. It's Home Depot, and I want you to know this. You can do it, we can help. That is a lie from the pit of hell itself. Okay, because look at me, y'all. Like, I cannot fix anything. If even my life depended on it. My good friend Dave Temberge, I think maybe he's in the back room, like, he knows I cannot even turn a screwdriver to save my life. And yet Home Depot, what they have done is they have sold you on a lie. What they're doing is they're promising this A zone, but then they're sucking you into the B zone. You know why? Because they know you're going to be back. Here's the thing. When those people at Home Depot, when they're waving by, like smiling, like, thank you for shopping at Home Depot, you know why they're smiling? Because they understand that you're going to be back 47 different times. Right? That like, the first time you notice that, like, you ended up getting the wrong part, and then the next time you go back, you realize that you don't have enough of the right parts. And then once you get all the right parts, then you realize that you don't have the right tools. And then all of a sudden, you think to yourself, it would have been cheaper for me to go ahead and just replace this thing completely than to try and fix it myself. So who's helping who at this point? See, here's a problem. When you go from the A zone into the B zone, that's when the dream starts looking a little bit more like the nightmare, right? Like in the beginning, you thought to yourself, the beginning of this year, I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to lose 15 pounds. I'm going to eat these little tasty rice cakes honey, these rice cakes are a lot tastier than I ever expected. Right now, a month later, you're like this, I hate these rice cakes. And then all of a sudden, when you find yourself right in the middle of the B zone, like the only thing you feel like doing at that moment is you feel like what? You feel like quitting. You got a million reasons to quit at this point. In fact, you don't know why you ever started this thing to begin with. See, here's the thing. At some point, what's going to happen is that life is going to end up B zoning you. And we're not simply just talking about Home Depot. Do you know what we're talking about? We're talking about every area of life. You know, because here's the thing about your new car. Your new car is eventually going to end up becoming your used car, except you're still going to end up making new car payments on it. You know, how many of you have been married less than 2 years? Anybody married less than 2 years? Okay, here, you know why all the older people were smiling at your wedding? It's not because we're all happy for your A zone. It's because we knew that soon enough that you would be joining us in the B zone. Welcome to our world, people. And here's the thing, what's going on in the B zone? What's going on in the B zone? Here's the thing, that all throughout the A zone that you've never ever experienced any problems, that everything was going great, right? Then all of a sudden what happened? You experienced one little bump in the B zone and you thought to yourself, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. So next slide right here. What happened is you went from the A zone promise, You went into the B zone problems, and then you just felt like going into the Q zone quitting at that point. And why is that? Do you know why it is that you quit in that moment? Because you wanted to experience those A zone feelings all over again. You wanted to know the newness and the love of being in the arms of another person. You wanted to experience the thrill and the rush of going to a new job, having a new body, experiencing a new life, going to a new church. Whatever it may have been, you thought to yourself, here's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and quit because those A-zone, we're so addicted to the adrenaline of those A-zone feelings that we just want to go ahead and start all over again. I think the average person maybe quits their job about every 3 years. Guess what? That's no different for any pastor in this world. The average pastor ends up staying at their church no longer than about how long? About 3 years. Do you know why? You know why? Because a pastor starts running out of, this sounds funny, pastor starts running out of things to say, starts sounding like a broken record right around about 3 to 5 years worth of time. And you know what he thinks to himself? With all these problems that are going on and with all the difficulty that it takes to study, get a whole bunch of new sermons, I got a great idea. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to reinvent myself by going to a new place, and now all I have to do is recycle the same 3 to 5 years worth of sermons all over again. You know what ends up happening in the process, though? We end up with this half-baked life that we find in the wake of us. Half paid off debt, half grown-up kids, half developed family, half lived up life. It's nothing but a half-hearted devotion to God at that point. And here's the way I feel. I feel that that is not only a problem with us as people, but that is also a problem with us as a nation, isn't it? That we don't have the endurance to get through the B zone. And so what happens is we just want to go ahead and quit because we're so addicted to those A zone feelings. We want to feel those feelings all over again. But the problem is, at that point, what begins to happen is we never, ever develop the strength and the muscles to actually make it through and experience what we need to experience on the other end. If you have your Bibles, turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 13. 1 Samuel chapter 13. If you don't have your Bibles, we're going to go ahead and throw the verses up on the screen because this is a story and this is a time where King Saul that we talked about earlier in our message, this is a time where King Saul quits. King Saul quit, and we have to understand the ramification of what happens in his life because what we're going to find is that transposes over to our life as well. 1 Samuel chapter 13, this is what we know. Saul quits. Saul is made king over Israel. By the way, war was on at this point, and if you are a part of a theocracy meaning that it is not a democracy, it is a theos, meaning God. God is the president of my country, literally. God is my leader. God is the one who forms the laws. God is the one who is the judge. God is the leader of my country. And if God is the leader of your country, well, you don't win a war without your leader. Saul knows this. So Saul is the king. I know it's easy to get confused with all these names. Saul is the king. Samuel is the prophet. Samuel then says to him, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to go ahead and make a sacrifice for you. Once I make a sacrifice for you, everything's going to be fine. But I'm not going to come back for about 7 days or so because I got this consulting gig I need to do, and my kids, they have an award ceremony tomorrow. So, in 7 days or so, I'm going to end up coming back and you've got to wait for me. Well, what ends up happening? That B-zone pressure ends up building up. By the way, the prophet is the only one who can make a sacrifice. The only one, and Saul knows that. But then that B-zone pressure ends up building up. He ends up taking the situation into his own hands. He ends up making that sacrifice himself. And what was meant to actually honor God ends up desecrating the altar. And this is the conversation that ensues between Saul and Samuel after that. By the way, after he makes that sacrifice, Samuel shows up almost moments after that. And it says this in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 11, where Samuel says, what have you done? Like, what have you done? Saul is under this huge amount of B-zone pressure. And it's when we're under that pressure that all of a sudden we're like, you know what? I quit. You know, it's a lot easier to go with my old golf swing. It's a lot easier just to go with my old job. It's a lot easier to do it the old way. And so, you know what? This new way isn't working out. I just need to just go ahead and quit. He goes on to say this. Saul replied, well, when I saw that the men were scattering, so in other words, the men were scattering, he's losing control. And so what's he going to do? He's going to blame somebody else except for himself. Come on. It's somebody else's fault. It's not mine. In fact, he's going to do that as we look on further where he says this, that you did not come at the set time. Listen, Samuel, this is not my fault. This is your fault because you didn't show up at the time where I needed you, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash. That's like a cool name. If I were the mayor of Eastvale, I would change our city name to Michmash, I think. I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord favor. So look at this. So I felt compelled. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering. So in other words, I felt compelled to disobey God. I felt like I had permission to disobey God. I was under B-zone pressure, so I ended up Q-zone quitting. You know why? Because it was just too much. I had to. How many of you have ever said that in your life? You've quit on something, and you convinced yourself and you convinced everyone else, I had to. I had no choice. How many of you have even used Bible verses in order to justify something that you knew was completely and totally out of God's will? I mean, we are just expert justifiers. We can justify anything in the world, right? Samuel doesn't feel the same way because he goes on to say this in verse 13. You have done a foolish thing, Samuel said. And because he ended up making this sacrifice, he is the one who ended up violating God. He was the one who dismissed God. He was the one who acted like God. And if you've read this story before, how many of us have gone, really? I mean, that's all he did. He even made a sacrifice. At least he did that much. All he did was just did it at the wrong time. But here's what I want you to understand, that there's no such thing as small sins. That there's only such thing as big sins. Do you know why? Because it's not the nature of the action itself that makes a sin big or small. It's the nature of the person that we sin against. Part of the reason why you can't commit a small sin is because there's no such thing as a small God. Big sin, because God is a big God. Goes on to say this, you have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. Now listen to this, because this is the Q zone that he has in mind. I mean, the C zone that he has in mind. I want you to listen. If you had done this, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all times. Let me tell you, if you would have disobeyed, your throne would not have been taken away from you, and you would have been allowed to be the king of Israel for the rest of your life. But you chose poorly. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out another man a man after his own heart, appointed him ruler of his people because you have not kept the commands of the Lord. In other words, he's saying this, that God had a wonderful plan for your life, that God wanted you to be the king of Israel forever, but you had a choice. And you chose to quit instead of enduring with something. And I think the same goes with you, and I think the same goes with me, that God has a wonderful plan for your life. That God has his glory and our future and this vision all set up for us. And you have the choice to quit on that, or you have the choice to keep going and to endure. Here's a quick question I have for you. Where would you and I be today without other people who have come alongside our lives and gone, you cannot quit. You cannot give up. Like, you've got to keep going. Let me tell you about one person in my life. His name is Rick Burge. He's a mentor friend of mine who's a pastor in Texas. Especially in the beginning of this church, I was one of the only staff members here. It was me. It was Tom was part-time. We had Monique quarter-time. That was it. And it was hard in the beginning. It was a lot of work. I was discouraged. And so there was this one time where I went to Rick and I said, Rick, I can't do this anymore. I cannot continue to come up with something new to say every single week. I feel inadequate as a leader. I am tired and I am discouraged. I cannot do this any longer. And I'll never forget what Rick said to me, because Rick has this nice little Texas twang, and he goes like this. He said, Mark, I'm sorry that you feel that way. By the way, that was the extent of the sympathy that I got from Rick. He said this, Mark, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I understand how you might be able to feel like that. But he said this to me. He said, Mark, I'm sorry, but quitting is not an option. You cannot quit. And by the way, if you're a wife who's thinking about leaving your husband, please never go to my wife for marital counseling, because she will tell you the same thing. You will talk to her about all these different things that your husband is doing, and she'll listen to you, but at the end, here's her advice. She'll say, I'm sorry, but you can't quit. That's it. Leave your check at the door. She'll say, there was a day where you made a promise before God and these witnesses, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do you part. I'm sorry, quitting is not an option. And I still remember what Rick said to me on that day. I'm sorry, Mark, quitting is not an option. And then he said this to me. He said, Mark, I'm sorry, but if you don't have enough faith in this moment, I've got enough for the both of us. So you've just got to keep going. You've just got to show up. And Mark, you've got to continue to do the right thing. And I'm talking to somebody here today, because there's somebody who feels like quitting on their health. There's somebody who feels like quitting on their marriage. There's somebody who feels like quitting on God. There's somebody who feels like quitting on their finances. And here's what God has sent me here today to tell you, that the C zone is closer than you think. Next slide. Because here's the thing. If the A zone is all about promise and the B zone is filled with problems, let me tell you what the C zone is all about. The C zone is all about the payoff. That's where the breakthrough is. That's where the win is. That's where the championship is. That's where the 5-year anniversary is, the 10-year anniversary. My wife and I, in 2 months, we're right about to celebrate our 20th anniversary. But that's not even the C zone for me. The C zone for me is when my wife shows up at my funeral. Now, hopefully she ain't the one who put me there. But that is when she shows up at my funeral, or I show up at her funeral, because we honored our vow. And we said, till death do us part, and there you are right there. You know what the C zone is all about? The C zone is about the retirement party. The C zone is all about the graduation. Like, you can do it. But let me tell you what it's going to take to get to the C zone payoff. It's going to take an I can attitude. You know what that is? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm going to end with this, that there's a movie that you've probably heard of called Chariots of Fire. English runner. There's an English runner named Harold Abrams, and he runs and he loses against the Scottish champion Eric Liddell for the first time in his life. Now, the pain of losing that race was absolutely unthinkable to that man at the time, because he had never ever lost a race in his life. And this was the conversation between him and his girlfriend. His girlfriend said, "Harold, this is ridiculous. You lost a race, not a relative." And Harold said, "But I lost." And she said, "I know. I was there. It was marvelous. You were marvelous." He was more marvelous on that one day. That's all. And on that one day, the best man won. He was ahead, and there's nothing you could have done about it. Abrams said this: "I don't win. I don't run to take beatings. I run to win." And his girlfriend remarks and says this: "Well, if you don't run, you can't win." And that's what I'm here to tell you. If you don't run, you can't win. Because here's the thing, when you show up at the race and you do your best and you end up winning, that is glorious. When you show up and you don't end up winning, that's not the best. But all I'm here to tell you is that's not failure. Failure is you just not showing up for that race at all. So all I'm here to tell you is this, that as you set your resolutions as to how this is going to be the best year ever, and as we're at the end of January and you already feel tired and you already feel like quitting, I'm here to tell you, no, you can't do that. Don't quit on your small group. Don't quit on volunteering. Don't quit on God. Don't quit on church. Don't quit on your finances. Don't quit on your health. Don't quit on your relationships. Don't quit on your job. Don't quit on